Okay, welcome everybody. And I wanted to, I'm very pleased to be interviewing uh, our author, Anna Rabkin. I've known her for over, I don't know, 15 years when I joined a FAB New Yorker group, and then she asked me to join her weekly writing group. And I I had the pleasure of joining that group and experiencing her memoir in progress, which is which turned out to be published in 2018 From Krakow to Berkeley, and it's published by Valentine Mitchell in 2018. We're very happy to start the FAB interviews again after a long hiatus. And Anna has always been the one who has interviewed the FAB authors. And now, when we started it up again, we decided to rotate the interviewers, and that we are inaugurating the first interview with the FAB author whom we have never interviewed before, and that's Anna. Uh, so thank you, Anna, for being here. And I would like to start out by your telling us a little bit about your background, your family, your birthplace, your journey through the education system, volunteer activities, anything that you think our viewers will get a feeling for who you are.
Well, thank you, Vivian, and thank you all for tuning in. Um, I was born in Krakow, Poland, and my father was a lawyer. My mother worked part-time as a small business manager for my cousin's weaving workshop. My adored, so sometimes very irritating brother preceded me by 3 years. Our father had his law office in one end of our apartment, and my mother hosted her friends at the other end of the apartment. So it was a very lively place. We had a very comfortable and happy childhood. But on September 1, 1939, that changed our lives forever. My life became one of serial escapes from the German army, from the Gestapo, from the ghetto, from the people who hit me during the war. After the war, I was fortunate enough to be part of an orphan rescue operation which saved us from Polish anti-Semitism, which continued after the war. I landed in England and I was sent to rural boarding schools where I was told not to think about the past, not to talk about my past, and only to use English. I was to focus on the present and the future. I learned English very quickly, but unfortunately, I also forgot Polish very quickly, which is, I think, tragic. By the age of 18, I lived independently in London and worked. In 1956, I was adopted by relatives and emigrated. We lived in Manhattan, and during the early years of the Cold War, I worked, ironically, as a travel agent who specialized in tours to the Iron Curtain countries. It was a dream job. In my early 20s, I traveled all over the world, and I never lost the travel bug. I just love to travel still. In 1960, my husband and I married, and we honeymooned in Cuba a year after the Castro Revolution. 2 years later, we escaped New York to escape some serious family tensions. We hit the road in a VW camper. Like thousands of other young people, we were looking for our Shangri-La. We settled in Berkeley and brought up our two children here. In Berkeley, finally, I found a place that I never needed or wanted to leave. The escapes of my youth finally came to an end. I've lived in Berkeley for now 62 years. It's hard to believe. After my children started elementary school, I became a college student for the first time. I received a master's degree from Cal in city planning, and I was elected Berkeley City Auditor in 1979 and served for 15 years. Very interesting time, as some of you may remember. When I retired in 1994, I returned to academia and got a second graduate degree in history. And at the time, I was also serving as the chair of the Berkeley Public Library Foundation, which was established to raise $4 million to furnish and equip the downtown library, which was being rebuilt and expanded, as some of you may remember. To my great astonishment, we met that staggering goal. I mean, $4 million, when I heard that amount, I thought we would never be able to do it, but we did. I stepped down as the chair of the foundation in 2003, and some of my retired friends and I held a garden party in my backyard. We didn't know at the time that we had given birth to the free agents at Berkeley, or FAB, not the FAB 4, but FAB at 64, a network of retired women, a totally self-directed organization that serves the needs of women as we transition from work to a new chapter in our lives. We had no idea how quickly the group would grow. Now we have some 250 members. We had no idea how many interest groups the members would create, everything from New Yorker political discussion groups to exploring San Francisco. We certainly had no inkling how valuable FAB would become to new arrivals in the Bay Area. Also, during COVID, it became a really important place where people could meet, mostly on Zoom, while we were being isolated. As Vivian mentioned, this is part of an interview series of FAB authors, which are being archived on the YouTube channel. And recently, I opened a new chapter in my life. I moved from my Berkeley Hills home, where I've lived for 61 years, to an apartment in a co-op building in downtown Berkeley, where I'm enjoying my return to urban living.
Thank you, Anna. That's quite a uh, quite a portrait of you. Now, we want to go to the book you've published, From Krakow to Berkeley, And maybe you could tell us a little bit about the book, but we want to hear you read from an excerpt from the book.
Yes, thank you. So the book is about a life that was scarred by hatred, loss, and war. It's also about the gradual healing of the emotional scars inflicted by war. It's about the restorative power of love and purpose that family and community can bring. It's about the resilience of a young immigrant who lived through sweeping cultural and political challenges and changes that took place between 1935 and 2015, which is the date that the book ends. The book doesn't shrink from painful topics, anti-Semitism, the tensions that the wife's career can pose in a marriage, or the vindictiveness of electoral politics. I've tried to write honestly, and I hope with some humor. My story is the Nazis' worst fear, a killing target who survived and thrived. And now I'd like to read you a snippet, which in hindsight was the beginning of my improbable involvement in Berkeley's civic life. So here we go. In 1968, the Republican-dominated government of Berkeley began to struggle to retain power. That shift started with the school board's decision to bus children to integrate the schools. As opponents of busing moved to school districts less threatening to their segregated way of life, more liberal residents replaced them. The political change accelerated significantly in the 70s after 18-year-olds won suffrage and students swelled the Democratic voter rolls. After 1975, moderate to progressive Democrats controlled most of Berkeley's elected positions. As the controversial school busing plan moved forward, my tot-lot friends encouraged me to attend PTA meetings at our neighborhood elementary school to help plan for the fall opening of integrated schools. I supported the busing initiative, but worried that I had nothing to contribute to the PTA. I wasn't a college graduate. How could I add anything to the discussion? But Michelle, my daughter, was entering kindergarten. Maternal concerns trumped my feelings of inadequacy. The comfortably worn school library was filled with about 30 parents, all white. The first order of business was the election of a new PTA board. One by one, the posts were filled, but no one would volunteer for the presidency. The convener announced that the PTA couldn't operate without a president. An uneasy silence filled the room. Ignorant about guilt-inducing tactics, the threat of losing our PTA worried me. The tension got to me. I raised my hand. I think my husband would do it. Marty was at home babysitting the children. Thank you, voted in by acclamation. On my return home, I sang out, "Guess who got elected president of the Hillside PTA? Wow, are you Madame President? No, you're Mr. President. What? I don't have the time. Marty, I'll do all the work. All you need to do is preside over public events. You know how scared I am of public speaking. My accommodating husband gave in and became the puppet PTA president. Tentatively, I took the first steps on a path that would lead towards my implausible future.
Thank you, Anna. That was nice. Now I want to ask you about the process of writing your book. What um what led you to write the book at the time that you did? Well, I don't when did you start writing it, and how long did it take from writing to publishing?
Yes, when it actually goes back to when we started FAB. Uh, at that time, I learned that many of my friends knew very little about their families. So in 2004, I started a FAB memoir writing group, which is still going strong. I see Linda is here. She's one of the members of that group. At first, I was writing solely for my family. I just didn't want them to lose the link to their past. Later, as Holocaust deniers became ever louder, I felt an obligation to bear witness to counter the lies that were being spread. However, it was the drumbeat of immigrant bashing and the stoking of hate against Muslims in 2016 that induced me to start thinking about publishing and going public. I realized that my early experiences of displacement, deprivation, discrimination, and death were not that different from what so many displaced people face today. And it's not only people in faraway places who suffer daily humiliation and hunger. We come to face to face with them on our streets, on our freeways, and in our parks.
And how long did it take you to write the book, and what was your writing experience like? Did you work by yourself, or did you work in a group, or both? How did that occur?
Well, it started out really during my work life, my writing revolved around producing professional reports. In 2009, I decided to take an OSHA lifelong learning memoir writing class. At the end of that class, several of us who were students in that class formed the Addison Street Writing Circle that Vivian is part of. Um, that writing group has continued to meet and write every Thursday morning since then. And I can tell you that without the encouragement and feedback from my group, from that writing group, this book would never have seen the light of day. I finished the manuscript in 2017, so it took about close to 8 years to write it. I sent it to 5 publishers and was fortunate that Valentine Mitchell, the first British publisher of the Diary of Anne Frank, picked it up. I was thrilled to go to London in 2018 for the book launch. I must say that digging into my past was sometimes painful, sometimes embarrassing, sometimes hilarious. But the response to the book from family, friends, and strangers made me realize how important it is to write about one's experiences. Readers often find the connections between the writers and their own lives very comforting. As a student of history, I know the thrill of finding written documents, letters, journals, memoirs that capture the details of particular times, places, and events and make them come alive. Especially important, I think, are women's voices. They're largely missing from history books for certain. And without our point of view, history is incomplete. So I want to encourage everyone to record, write, and tell your stories because your children shouldn't, or your grandchildren shouldn't have to do detective work to learn about their families.
Thank you. Given that I'm in your writing group, Anna, I know that you are working on another book. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that book or the title, and perhaps you have a little snippet that you could entice us with.
Thank you. I'm glad to say that the manuscript is complete. And I'm now in the process of looking for publishers, which, as you all know, is difficult. I've gone through many different titles, but the working title now is A Story for Our Times, Antonina Valentin and the Fight Against Fascism. Antonina Valentin was a remarkable woman whose life highlights the chilling parallels between the rise of fascism in interwar Europe and the situation in the United States today. Now forgotten, she was the most famous female biographer of her era. So I'll read you just a little bit from the introduction just to give you the setup. On January 6, 2021, I sat by the radio in my kitchen in Berkeley, California, frozen with horror, as reporters described a violent mob storming the U.S. Capitol, desecrating the building, and shouting murderous threats against elected officials. As the day unfolded, I heard reports of injuries and death. Supporters of the defeated former President Donald Trump were trying to stop Congress from certifying the results of the 2020 presidential election and prevent the peaceful transfer of power to the president-elect Joe Biden. Could this really be happening in the world's longest enduring democracy? On November 10, 1938, my relatives in Leipzig, Germany, must have asked a similar question. Is this really happening? On that date, their peaceful, comfortable lives were shattered. On Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, the rabble-rousing political rhetoric erupted into mass violence across the country. Nazi leaders orchestrated a riot by police and military officers, Hitler Youth, and ordinary citizens who burned synagogues, smashed houses and stores, and beat and killed Jews. The political polarization of the current moment, the disdain for democratic norms, the use of media to spread lies and invective, the ubiquitous surveillance, the drumbeat of hate and violence are all unnerving reminders of the years between World War I and II, the interwar period when fascism rose to power in Europe. As I struggle to understand what is happening now in my adopted home country, I find myself drawn back to research I began decades ago on a journalist and author and activist, Antonina Valentin. She was a public intellectual who believed that she and her peers had a responsibility to educate and warn society about the evils of the nascent Nazism. She became a passionate advocate for democracy during the short-lived Weimar Republic in Germany. Even after Hitler's takeover of the German government, when she was placed on the enemies list, she continued her fight against fascism. Now more than ever, her life and work deserve attention. At a time when women's options in society were severely constrained, Valentin's defiance of prescribed gender roles was striking. She achieved remarkable heights behind the scenes political power and professional success. She rubbed elbows with prime ministers and Nobel laureates, with best-selling authors and world-famous artists. Today, she's forgotten. To reconstruct Valentin's life, I searched archives to find essays and articles, and most importantly, the copious letters she exchanged with some of the leading intellectuals of her time. Ironically, a woman who reveled in telling other people's stories kept her own life extremely private. I had to piece her together from the professional communications and personal messages preserved by her correspondence, and through tantalizing glimpses of her personality caught in the memoirs of her peers. She appears on those pages vividly and then vanishes from the historical record. Valentin's near disappearance reminds us a history that erases women's voices will always be incomplete. Now, at a time when many people are saying, I'm horrified by what's happening, but I don't know what I can do about it, it's important to excavate role models from the past who stood up for what they believed and took action. When many of Valentin's contemporaries were clinging to the hope that fascism was a fringe flash-in-the-pan movement that would be ended by politics as usual, she took the full measure of its menace. Her activism was both public and private. She did everything in her power to raise awareness and urge resistance, and went to great lengths to help her friends, especially the most vulnerable amongst them. When Valentin, a Polish-born Jewish woman, sat down in the 1930s to write a book about the life and times of the German statesman Gustav Stresemann, two powerful forces motivated her: deep admiration for her subject and a fierce desire to warn of the perils of fascism. Almost a century later, I, another Polish-born Jewish woman, set out to write about the life and times of Antonina Valentin for the same reasons. I have studied and admired Valentin for years, but the times we are living in now lend a new urgency to my desire to share her story. Although the past does not repeat itself, there's much we can learn from it, and the lack of historical understanding is extremely dangerous. Valentin once wrote, quote, "In all the big crises which shake the world, there's no place outside the struggle." Throughout her career, she used her voice to resist reactionary, authoritarian forces. Even when she faced danger or despair, she found time for joy as well. Her life was a celebration of friendship and community and the transcendent power of literature and art. I hope readers will be inspired as I am by the courage and the resilience of this trailblazing woman. So, as I told you, I'm currently in the process of trying to find a literary agent or a publisher. So, if anyone has ideas, please get in touch with me. Thank you so much.
Anna, before we open it up for questions, uh, do you have any remarks you would like to say that I didn't ask you? And also, if you could tell us, how can we get a hold of your book, the one that's already published, to read it?
Well, it's available on Amazon. You can get it secondhand on the books. Um, it's um, it's in the public library. We discovered that for some reason it's been put in the history room, and the history room is only open 1 day a week. So Vivian is making moves to try and get it more into a more public place. And I do have a couple of copies I just found. So if anybody wants it, I have some.
I also found that the Oakland Public Library has it, so that's another resource. So, okay, everybody. Do you all have questions? Let me,
Linda has a question.
oh, okay, somehow I'm not getting everybody's video, so thank you. It's Linda, your
Yes,
question?
yes. Anna, you said that you were very shy, and yet you became the city auditor and was reelected several times. How did you get over your shyness?
This is a loaded question. Linda, Linda knows that I was so scared of public speaking, and somebody said, "Oh, you have to join Toastmasters." And that is how Linda and I met. She was active in the health department Toastmasters in downtown Berkeley, and I was a loyal participant for, I don't know, at least 5 or 6 years. And it really, really helped me to get over the fear of public speaking. I highly recommend it.
Thank
It's a
you.
challenge, but it's a really good one. It's called, mine is Berkeley Bay Toastmasters Club.
Okay.
Does someone else have a question? Mary, you want to unmute yourself?
There we go. Hi, Anna. Hi, everybody. Anna, what happened to your older brother when you both ended up from Europe into or from Poland to England? Did you both then get adopted by family?
No, so my brother was really my protector and my father during my childhood. We both were on the orphan transport from Poland to England. We both ended up in the same boarding school, but of course, he was older than I was. So he graduated and went on to medical school in Bristol. Um, and the first boarding school had to close because of financial problems, and I was sent to another boarding school in another part of England. The relatives who adopted me in New York, I was the only one who was adopted, but my brother, after he finished his medical education in England, applied for postgraduate work at Harvard. And so a couple of years after I came to New York, he followed, but he was living in Boston. So we didn't see each other that much. So by the time that he moved to New York, I had moved to California. So we had a long distance relationship, but a very close one.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Other questions? Claire, unmute yourself.
Yes, and suddenly my camera just started working in the midst. So, Anna, I'm curious as to what you credit most with your ability to get through that early trauma. I mean, that's just huge trauma of the war and the anti-Semitism and the hiding. So did simply people telling you not to think about the past do that? Or what do you think helped you grow that resilience that you so admiringly exhibit?
You know, it's hard to know. I know that nowadays people would say that what I was told to just forget the past was not the right thing to do. But at the time, there were so many people. I mean, let's face it, the English went through the Blitz. They were traumatized through the war. There were so many traumatized people at that time that all people wanted to do was just to move on and to forget what had happened and to live a normal life. And hardly anybody talked about the war. You know, it was like a forbidden subject. I remember being sent to a sleepaway camp, and on the train, some of the other children said, "Oh, we heard that you're an orphan. What happened to you?" And I said, "I don't want to talk about it." You know, so I just shut them up. And I really do believe that I was very, very fortunate. I was very lucky. And the luck was all tied to other people who took care of me, who went out of the way to help in whatever way they could. Whether it was just, you know, after the war, there was no food, we were always hungry. You know, they established a homeless kitchen where we got our food. You know, the American strangers who sent care parcels to us. I mean, you know, it just, so I think luck, it wasn't luck, it was actions by people that made the difference. And that's why I feel so strongly that all of us, you know, can do little things.
other questions? You can raise your hand if you like. I can. Okay, I don't see that anyone has any other questions. So Anna, is there some piece of advice you can give us all if people want to write their own memoir, or if they just some advice about life?
I don't have much advice about life. I think we all have to find our own ways, and but I do encourage you all to write your memories because they are really important um, for your families and for others. Um, and at this particular time, I think capturing what we are living through is very, very important. It's part of American history. Um, I think some of you must probably have followed Rachel Maddow and how she has written the history of fascism in this country. So it has happened before, and we're living through another age that is very, very threatening.
Yes, indeed. So
Thank you all for coming,
yes,
and I really appreciate it. And thank you, Vivian, for a wonderful interview.
I just want to remind everybody that the recording will be posted on the FAB website. Give it probably a week or so, but I will send out a notice on FAB list. So those of you who are members of FAB will know when it's available. Otherwise, go to freeagentsofberkeley.com and click on author interviews, and then all of the recorded interviews are listed there. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Vivian. Thank you, Anna.
And